Hi, my name's Nadia Bokody and I'm a sex columnist, YouTuber, and Astroglide's official ambassador. And today I want to share with you some of my all-time favorite lesbian sex tips. So as someone who identifies as a lesbian myself, I want to first dismantle a very common, very problematic myth around lesbian sex before I get into my top tips. And that is the idea that two women simply just can't have real sex. Now, this goes back to heteronormative culture, which teaches us that sex can only occur between a man and a woman, and it needs to include a penis going into a vagina. But queer people know this is simply not true. Sex can happen between two people who are anywhere on the gender spectrum, and it doesn't need to involve penetration or a penis. In fact, you can have a whole lot of pleasure without either of those things. And with that out of the way, let's get into my first favorite tip. One of my favorite things about having sex as a queer person is the fact that it doesn't tend to be goal-orientated. More often than not, heterosexual sex focuses around reaching climax. There is essentially a set end point to the sex. It's a point that you're trying to get to, and then when you get there, the sex is essentially over. But with queer sex, this is rarely the case. Lesbian sex can last for hours and hours and hours, and it often includes lots of rest breaks, lots of stopping and talking and reflecting, and multiple orgasms. So really enjoy the fact that you do not need to get to a set goal when you are with your partner. Do not make the sex about getting to orgasm. Make the sex about giving and receiving pleasure. And orgasms are probably going to come, pun intended, somewhere along the way, but they won't be the most important part of the sex. The most important part is about bonding with your partner and about sharing pleasure. One of the biggest misconceptions around lesbian sex is the idea that it involves something called scissoring. And scissoring is the idea that two women essentially form their bodies into scissors by both opening up their legs and then essentially smashing their pelvises against each other. It really doesn't sound very fun. I mean, if that's for you, then that's great, you do you. But in reality, lesbian sex tends to more often than not involve something called tribbing as opposed to scissoring. And tribbing is a much more comfortable and far more pleasurable version of this idea of scissoring. It involves essentially straddling over and mounting your partner's thigh or even their pelvis and grinding against them. This is pleasurable for a number of reasons. It brings you close to your partner so you can feel that real sense of togetherness and bonding. It allows your partner a great visual because you're going to be on top of them and so they can see you in all your naked, sexy glory. And straddling exposes the clitoris. So when you grind, the clitoris is going to get stimulated. And we know from research that roughly 2/3 of women require direct, sustained clitoral stimulation to reach orgasm. So it's a very effective way of getting to climax for many women. The clitoris has around 8,000 nerve endings in it, which is actually more nerve endings than you would find in the head of the penis. So it really does have the ability to deliver incredible pleasure. But because of all those nerve endings, if it is not stimulated correctly, it can also be extremely uncomfortable. And that's why I never ever recommend having sex and stimulating the clitoris without involving personal lubricant. I absolutely always use it when I have sex with a partner. And that's because it helps to cut down on friction and make everything more smooth and comfortable so I can enjoy the pleasure. And that's something I do even if I'm already super turned on and naturally lubricated, because it's an extra layer of lubrication in there to cut back on that friction. And Astroglide have an amazing range of personal lubricants to choose from that you can incorporate into sex. My personal favorite is Astroglide's gel because it's a water-based lubricant, so it most closely resembles your own natural lubrication and it lasts a long time. So a little goes a long way and you don't have to interrupt the flow of sex by constantly reapplying it. Another great option is Astroglide's Organics liquid, which contains 95% organic ingredients and is free from parabens, hormones, fragrances, and flavors. We've all heard that idea that women who use toys, dildos, strap-ons, and vibrators are simply looking to replace a penis or replace a real man. And again, this is an incredibly damaging myth that really delegitimizes queer female relationships and queer female sex, and essentially bases around this idea that the penis is responsible for all the pleasure that women can possibly receive. And this just is not true. Toys can be a great addition to queer female sex, and they're certainly not replacing a penis. Rather, using a strap-on can be a great addition to queer female sex, and it can allow you to experience G-spot stimulation and a feeling of penetration and fullness. Plus, it's super sexy to watch your partner put it on and use it. And the great thing about strap-ons is they strap on, so you can take turns using it on each other. Just make sure that in between use you do wash it thoroughly with sex toy cleaner, and that each and every time you use a strap-on, you're using personal lubricant generously. By using personal lubricant, you're going to make the entry of a toy or a dildo or a strap-on super smooth and comfortable. It's going to allow you to relax and enjoy the pleasure, and you're not going to have to worry about friction. I definitely recommend using one of the water-based lubricants I recommended earlier for this, because they go a long way, so you don't have to worry about constantly reapplying them during sex. I hope my tips will help you go forth and have better, wetter, hotter lesbian sex. And if you've got any tips that you would like to share that I've missed here, please share them in the comments section down below. And I'll see you all in the next video.